Well, very good. Well, welcome everybody. Again, my name's Carly, and I work through the Minnesota DNR Parks and Trails at Jay Cook State Park. I'm one of the interpretive naturalists there. So this is a new venue for me. Thank you, Tricia, for inviting me. And to dive into more of the whole watershed and not just reflecting on the St. Louis River that runs through Jay Cook State Park and into Lake Superior, but looking at the whole watershed and the life within it. So again, good morning. And I'd actually like to start out by acknowledging that we are gathered together on the ancestral land of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, and the Dakota peoples. So let us together honor their elders past and present. We thank them for their stewardship of this land, and I thank them personally for their highly valued guidance and understanding. So what I'd like to focus on during this presentation is to highlight the interconnectedness of the watershed environment of the St. Louis River, sharing how all the pieces of this life-filled puzzle are working together, and focusing on some of the more sensitive critters of the St. Louis River in northern Minnesota. All right, so Minnesota. Can you guys see the whole screen? Tricia, can you see the whole screen? Because I'm seeing the chat function on the side. Maybe I can.
Yes, we can see the full screen.
Okay.
I see place names, and then it's got the 4 boxes.
Perfect. Okay, so Minnesota. Minnesota derives from the Dakota phrase, which means land where the water reflects the sky. And across Minnesota, across the country, there's obviously lots of indigenous terms out there that are naming that specific place. So besides the word Minnesota, Minnehaha comes from the Dakota phrase tumbling water. Minnetrista comes from the Dakota phrase crooked water. Minnetonka comes from the Dakota phrase big water. So we can see these different characteristics of geography that have become names of our places. So this landscape, this Minnesota land where water reflects the sky landscape, is dotted with waterways. As humans living in a place of abundant fresh water, we are privileged and have a great responsibility to take good care of that water, which maintains the life within each watershed. So everybody listening, take a big deep breath, or several. Now, either look out your window, if you have a window nearby, and look at something nearby you that is of nature-based outside, a natural object, a tree, a shrub, just a patch of ground out your window. If you don't have a window, look at something that is made with nature-based material, like the wood floor, or a house plant, natural fibers that make up a blanket or a basket or artwork, and focus on that. If you're in an unfamiliar place, those objects might draw a lot of interest or attention, take a lot of energy and diversion. But if you're in a familiar place with familiar surroundings around you, your interest in it might be more of comfort and routine, accustomed or acquainted. those natural and cultural items help connect us to our place. So even in our own backyard is rich with observation, creating that sense of place for us. Many of us in the this northern climate seem to be drawn to water. Water is obviously important to our life, to our health, to physically and mentally, one way or the other, indirectly or directly. If you're from Minnesota, the landscape of wetlands, streams, lakes, and rivers is very familiar to you. It's part of this unique place, and you can see here on the screen, I came up with some statistics about how many lakes and rivers and streams and wetlands there are that have been counted within this beautiful state. The lakes, I guess, those are 11,842 lakes over a certain acreage. I think it was over 10 acres, or I would have to look that up again. But at any rate, there's a lot. There's more than 10,000. So we have this unique place of Minnesota full of water. If you grew up here or are living here now, you likely know that nearby lake with the breathtaking sunrise that makes you stop and pause. Or you know that stream giving scent to its mossy covered rocks and willow banks. Or you know that pond or wetland with the melodious chorus of frogs. The St. Louis River watershed encompasses all of these watery habitats with its 3,634 square miles of place. A watershed is an area that drains to a common waterway, like a creek or a stream, and then drains to a larger body of water. So the water flows and grows as other rivers join it. For example, the Otter Creek, which is within Jay Cooke State Park, has about half a dozen other smaller branches that feed into it, but that main Otter Creek then supports the St. Louis River by flowing into that and helping it grow. The St. Louis River, as you see, is a fairly large river. It's actually the largest river on the United States side of the border that flows into Lake Superior, among over 300 other rivers flowing into the lake. At the end of its 192-mile long journey, this St. Louis River actually becomes a freshwater estuary as it enters into Lake Superior, the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface area. So Lake Superior. Lake Superior, it was a name given by French explorers through their visual observations, of course, as well as the interpretations that they, from the name given by the Anishinaabe Ojibwe people. So the Anishinaabe called it Gitchigami, which means great water or great sea or great lake. And then they named the St. Louis River Gitchigami Ziibi, Great Lake River, naming that place by its geography. So, of course, water is great. Some refer to water as the blood of Mother Earth. Every raindrop is important, of course, and the health of our lake is not only dependent on what care we give to those great waters, it's also dependent on the care that we give the waters that feed into it. So the St. Louis River continues to return to a healthy status. However, it wasn't always healthy. When one raindrop, of course, is polluted, it could flow into the next water source and pollute that as well. So everything is interconnected as we see with the water, and water is reflected in that connection. So we can look at and we can study H2O as it moves from an evaporated molecule to a speck of dust as a condensed droplet in a cloud, to the refreshing shower that cools us from the summer heat, or the miraculous identity of each delicate snowflake, and returning back in full circle to the land we call place. To learn and fully understand the water is to magnify our understanding using both eyes, our mind and our heart. When we remove ourselves from that web of life, the web starts to fall apart, and all pieces of that natural system need to work together to be in balance. So there's a couple of quotes here. One by Chris Eilers: "We destroy things when we get too far removed from the environment." So when we're not seeing through both eyes, through our mind and our heart, to notice that we humans are actually part of that web of life, then we start seeing a separation between us and the rest of the planet, the natural systems, and things start to fall apart. As the Industrial Revolution pried people away from their connection to the land, nature's systems began feeling those impacts. Unfortunately, with the growth of technology and wonderful things that we use every day, some of that has definitely shown to impact our natural systems in a great way. By the 1950s and 60s, the lower St. Louis River was one of the most heavily polluted in the state of Minnesota. There was over a dozen different cities and industries that had dumped waste directly into this precious source of life. And this wasn't necessarily a unique thing to the St. Louis River and this area. This was happening across the country, across the world. And people weren't seeing with both eyes. They weren't noticing the impacts that they were making to those natural systems. So by the 1960s and early 70s, there was orange sludge on the top of the St. Louis River with green murky liquid underneath that orange sludge. It wasn't water anymore. Minnesota citizens stepped up and demanded change, and in 1971, WLSSD, or the Western Lake Superior Sanitary District, was established to help address this serious pollution problem of the St. Louis River Basin and its tributaries. So with the help of Minnesota citizens and other citizens across the nation, they helped to encourage lawmakers to pass a federal Clean Water Act, which was passed in 1972, but had its start in the 1950s to help clean up point source pollution, the kind that comes directly from industries. In 1978, WLSSD treatment plant began operating, and within 2 years of that, fish populations began to rebound. However, the historical industrial use of the river before the onset of those modern pollution laws had resulted in the river and lake sediments being contaminated with a whole list of different chemicals, from mercury to PCBs and a whole list of other toxins. In 1987, the Environmental Protection Agency declared the river an area of concern under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. And this cleanup is still ongoing today. And it's proving positive results as we continue to dive into it. However, there's still fish consumption advisories, lots of habitat loss, and beach closures happening, undesirable algae growth, and of course, tainted drinking water are some of those issues affecting our health and our well-being, because we are connected. In this more recent past, people weren't necessarily seeing with both eyes, and the destruction happened fast. It wasn't being noticed that parts of the web of life were falling and failing. And now there is a chance to repair and mend. So cleaning a waterway involves the whole watershed ecosystem, from the main river to the tributary streams and creeks and ditches and the land, the forests and soil connected with it as well. So if you can imagine pouring dirty water into a dirty glass, if you empty the dirty water out and refill the glass with clean water, it's still a dirty glass, right? And that new fresh water will be dirty. So it's fairly easy and quick, so to speak, to destroy a web or unravel that woven blanket, but to heal a sick landscape and even bring it back to life obviously is a challenge. It takes a lot of understanding of how the pieces of our life ecosystem puzzle fit together to notice and see how we are part of that balance. So in the 1970s, people didn't go to Jay Cook State Park necessarily to hang out by the iconic swinging bridge and enjoy the beauty of the unique riverbed. Back in the 70s, they didn't necessarily do that because of the noxious odors and the large fish kills in the colored sludge lining the riverbanks. So a lot of work has been done over the past few decades to return the river back to a balanced and healthier status with the help of several companies and agencies and individual people. And today we are thankfully seeing the positive results of that. It takes a lot of time, obviously, patience, and a lot of hard work. A lot of hard work. So show me your mussels. Your freshwater mussels. Freshwater mussels are they're indicators of a healthy water environment. So the more mussels, freshwater mussels there are, and the greater variety, the cleaner and healthier the water is. And so freshwater mussels, I'm not talking about zebra mussels. Don't be confused with zebra mussels. Those are actually a non-native species that have caused a whole new story of problems. Specifically relating to this, they proficiently clear the water. So they take all of the good nutrients and everything out of the water, clearing it. But clear water doesn't necessarily mean clean water. So I'm not going to talk about all the problems zebra mussels have created, but besides freshwater mussels, there are several other animal species that can actually act as a canary in the coal mine, so to speak, or a bioindicator, which refers to basically serving as a warning to others that something isn't right, something's wrong. So a bioindicator is a living organism that gives us an idea of the health of an ecosystem. So some animals or organisms are very sensitive to pollution in their environment. So if pollutants are present, the organism may change in some way or form. So it might change its normal functions or how it acts or behaves, and it could also even die. So freshwater mussels are they're very beneficial to the health and the well-being of the river ecosystem, and they have been widely used as a bioindicator to monitor the health and well-being of aquatic environments, both freshwater and marine environments. So there's a lot of marine species of this as well. So they have two shells of equal size and shape, and they are hinged together by a strong ligament. So to protect their soft internal tissue from predators, those predators would be like muskrats or raccoons or otters or ducks. The mussel can actually close its shell very, very tightly with this strong internal muscle. And so mussels they're important. They are filter feeders, and so they siphon water in. So as they're siphoning that water in, they're eating the plankton and other microscopic creatures and toxins out of the water before returning that water back to the river in a much cleaner status. They are pretty unique. They're a pretty unique critter. They only have 1 foot, and that helps them to scoot along the river bottom, and it also acts like an anchor when they just want to stay put. It's a pretty unique life cycle. It's very dependent on many factors in the river ecosystem. They reproduce very slowly and basically just by chance because they depend on a specific host fish to help distribute their young. So it's just by chance that that specific host fish will come by and help them distribute their young, their Glaucidia. The United States and Canada are home to the most diverse amount of freshwater mussels in the world. Of the almost 300 known species of freshwater mussels, about 70% of them are listed as endangered, threatened, or of special concern. And so that is a big, I guess, eye-opener to help us understand the status of our waterways. The main factors contributing to their decline include destruction of habitat from dams, increased sediment or siltation, modified channels of the riverway, as well as the introduction of those zebra mussels or other invasive species. Freshwater mussels do require a constant source of cool, clean water with a mineral content in it because they use calcium carbonate to help build their shells. So as a bioindicator, the freshwater mussel population status and their physiology, their behavior, or even the level of contamination in them can indicate the status of the health of the ecosystem. The interconnections that these freshwater mussels have within their place is so outstanding that these critters could basically have their own 1,000-piece puzzle. They're phenomenal at what they do and how connected they are to their place. There are many other bioindicators that can help us see or notice the health status of the river. And so just to make this a little bit more, feeling like it's a little bit more interactive to me, since this is such a new type of venue for me with not much interaction with you guys. I am going to see if you can guess what some of these critters are. So I guess it's like a puzzle. You can try and figure out as we go along. So here are some I am riddles, and you can just think about these to yourself, or I know you've got the chat feature there, but you might not want to give away your answer either. There's no reward at the end, just a nice virtual high five. So the I am riddle to start us out is, I start out my life in the water as a nymph, and I eat aquatic insects, tadpoles, and even small fish. As an adult, I fly around near water sources and love to eat lots of mosquitoes. Spending most of my life underwater in rivers, streams, ponds, or lakes, my presence in the water habitats do signify water quality because I need clean water to survive. As an adult, you will find many different species of my kind. Some of us are small, some large, but we all look like flying dragons. What am I? So I probably started you out with a pretty easy one. Dragonflies and damselflies are macroinvertebrates known as benthic insects, or basically critters that live in or on the water, at least during some stage of their life cycle. Their survival also requires healthy native plants to provide oxygen and clean the water, as well as providing places for them to hide from predators as they transform from the nymph stage to the adult stage. If dragonflies are absent from an aquatic environment, the issue might be caused by pesticides and excessive nutrients from the nearby soil and water contaminants from human settlements or nearby industries. The presence or absence of these sensitive insects that live in the water during the first half of their life and rely on the food and habitat of the water environment for the second half of their life can indicate the health of that place and give us a physical sense of our damage or our care to that place or area. There's quite a few other benthic insects that can be used for this awareness purpose. Other benthic insects that live in or on the water during some stage of their life cycle and can act as a bioindicator would be mayflies, stoneflies, caddisflies, and then other things like mosquitoes. So some species like mosquitoes can actually be bioindicators as well, but show results on the opposite side of the spectrum, since mosquitoes are not as sensitive to polluted waters as other critters are. So it can show you the opposite side of that. All right, well, here's the next riddle, another puzzle to figure out. I am a critter that lives in shallow water along the shoreline and in ponds, where I wait for an insect snack to come along. Even though the webbing on my hind foot is incomplete, with a goofy long toe, my webbed feet are very helpful since I swim a lot in my aquatic home. If I sense danger around, I give a squeaky warning cry while leaping into the water. Normally, you hear my call sound, which sounds like a banjo string being plucked. Gunk, gunk, gunk. Females lay 3,000 to 4,000 eggs that float in the water, typically May through August, and hatch within 3 to 5 days. Before I am an adult, I look much different and don't even have legs when I start my life as a tadpole. What am I? Specifically, a green frog. Green frogs are protected in some states. The tadpoles may overwinter before metamorphose. I can't even say that word. You know what I'm talking about. And they graze on algae and plants in the water. As an adult, they need to stay in or near water to prevent dehydration since their skin lacks a shell. They lack scales, of course, and other dry coating on their skin, so they need to stay within water's reach to keep hydrated. Frogs and other amphibians are good bioindicators because they have permeable skin, which allows substances to be absorbed relatively freely through their skin and into their body, including toxins that can concentrate in their fatty tissues. Another interesting thing about frogs is actually their hearing. So frogs don't have an open ear hole. If they did, they'd probably end up with a lot of swimmer's ear, right? Their tympanum is, which, we all have that inside of our ear, but theirs is located on the outside of their body. You can see the kind of oval shape right behind their eyes, and that helps to keep the water out. So this oval membrane doesn't process sound, it transmits the sound to the inner ear of the frog, that inner part. And also something cool and interesting is that a frog's lungs are also involved in receiving sounds. So the significance of clean water to a frog isn't just to quench its thirst and stay hydrated. All right, the next riddle to try and figure out. I am Minnesota's only aquatic carnivore. My home is a den on the side of the riverbank or lake bank, which might actually be old burrows made by a beaver or a muskrat. I like to eat mostly fish, but also crayfish, turtles, frogs, lamprey, and sometimes even insects and muskrats. I am very playful and curious, and you'll see me exploring at dusk and dawn in clean, quiet waters. What am I? Well, if you guessed river otter, you're right. River otters are part of the weasel family. And they can weigh up to 30 pounds and be 3 to 4 feet long, which includes their long tail. They have excellent swimming skills with their slender body, their water repellent fur, nostrils and ears that close underwater, and their hind webbed feet help them achieve gold stars in that category. In a healthy environment, river otters can live a couple decades. They spend their entire life in and out of the water constantly, and they do not like crowded areas or, of course, polluted water. Sounds kind of like me. So they wouldn't do very well walking around the state fair, probably. So as a predator, they help to control the species of prey that they eat. And this is a prominent concern because the river otter, being at the top of the food chain, increases their susceptibility to bioaccumulation of a wide range of contaminants that might be in the area. And since we humans are part of this ecosystem and are also at the top of the food chain, we can certainly see and understand the similarities of health and well-being that we would both share in that realm. Studies have shown that the accumulation of mercury causes neurochemical changes in this particular family of critters, particularly otters. Other toxins, whether directly or indirectly, have shown to cause health deficits like decreased body mass, chronic inflammation, liver injury, malnutrition, even the waterproofing on their fur is reduced. And with that, heat loss and hypothermia, changes in behavior, in their social structure and social organization among them, their fitness, mating, aggression, territorial behavior, parental care with their pups, pup survival, and a whole slew of neurological issues as well with balance, memory, communication, being able to forage, many other impacts. It's quite astounding what these chemicals that build up in their tissues can do. And some of those sound familiar to us humans as well. As otters eat mostly at the top of the food web, they acquire larger amounts of those pollutants in their system, more than many other species. So as a result, they can be more likely to be affected by a polluted habitat than other species toward the bottom of the food chain. The effects of pollutants can cause either illness, they can affect the endocrine system, reproductive success, and this characteristic makes otters good indicators of pollution levels in the and general health of the local ecosystem. We know that if otters are thriving and their populations are growing, then their habitat must be reasonably healthy. And it's fun to notice that the St. Louis River, we see quite often, we see river otters in Jay Cook State Park, especially nearby the visitor center and the swinging bridge. So that's definitely a great sign that the water of the St. Louis River has turned a corner and coming back to life. All right, let's see. Oh, I have another riddle for you. I hope you guys are getting a kick out of this. I am a fish with a long, flat head and 4 barbels underneath my snout, helping me find my food. Fossils of my species have been found showing that I once swam when the dinosaurs roamed 65 million years ago. I am the largest fish found in North America's fresh waters, exceeding over 100 pounds and 7 feet long from the tip of my nose to the tip of my shark-like tail. I am not covered with scales, but instead I have gray, leathery skin and 5 ridges of armored plates. What am I? All right, so it's the lake sturgeons. Lake sturgeon are to Minnesota's lakes and rivers what bison once were to the Great Plains. They provided a reliable source of food to indigenous people. These giant fish, literally giant fish, they graze on aquatic invertebrates and mollusks with their tube-like mouth. They have a very odd look. I should have put a picture up there of a close-up of their mouth. It stems from beneath their nose. They have this tube-like mouth. So the adults kind of scoot along the bottom of the riverbed and they suck up their food, and they have a very healthy variety in their diet of small mussels, snails, crayfish, aquatic insects and larvae, as well as algae and some plants, water plants. All helpful, of course, to help keep our waterways in balance and maintained. Unfortunately, these giants with good genes, outlasting many other species for millions of years, unfortunately, they can't compete with the past harmful environmental changes and even the disregard for their importance in the web of life, and are currently listed as a species of special concern. There was a lot of harmful oversight from the past that caused a lot of overfishing, as well as, I'm not going to go into it, but non-traditional uses of the fish. And of course, habitat alteration and pollution and all of those things turned this species from one of our most abundant large fishes to one of our rarest. Sturgeon, of course, are highly dependent on good water quality to survive. And as I touched on before, with the St. Louis River being looked at as a dump and wasteland with toxic wastes that were intentionally discharged into the water at one point, our source of life, it didn't even have oxygen to breathe for a fish, let alone one that needs to survive 20 years to reach maturity before it can reproduce. Through history stories like that of the lake sturgeon, it's easy to understand the importance of creating fishing and harvesting regulations for people to follow. Without them, a species can literally be harvested to death. Were it not for the Clean Water Act, though, of 1972, forcing some mills and industries to clean up their act with that point source pollution, lake sturgeon would have definitely likely disappeared. Minnesota and Wisconsin DNRs and other restoration partners, including tribal governments, have brought the sturgeon back from the brink by tightening those fishing regulations and removing some dams, cleaning up the waters, of course, around the state, and then also more recent efforts of releasing sturgeon fingerlings and fry into the formerly polluted lakes and rivers. So these actions together have allowed for a pretty robust recovery of the lake sturgeon. And they have been reintroduced into the St. Louis River, and it has now proven to be very successful. We have lake sturgeon reproducing on their own and not just being released into the river. So they're reproducing on their own again, slowly but surely. So perhaps someday, with continued care, we will once again see these ancient, gentle giants of our freshwaters live to see their 100th birthdays again. So take a deep breath, because, you know, obviously learning about some of this stuff is a little bit dire, but the river is looking better, it's acting better, but obviously it's still aching from the years of neglect and disconnect from humans, from the people that call this place home as well. There's still a long road ahead to bring it back to bring the river back to feeling 100%. But with the continued efforts being made today, there's hope to achieve more goals for tomorrow. Our own health depends on the health of our place. So let's see, I think I might have a couple more riddles here for you. Here's the next riddle. I am a small fish and prefer hanging out near boulders and logs where I'm protected from strong currents and predators. I have a dark green colored back with a light colored worm pattern across my back and sides. I have a distinctive sprinkling of red dots surrounded by blue halos on my sides. My belly is reddish colored and my lower fins have white edges. Of my species, I am one of only 2 that are native to Minnesota. We both have the letter K in our names. What am I? So this one might be a little bit more tricky, but if you guessed brook trout, virtual high five to you. Brook trout and lake trout are the 2 native trout species to Minnesota. These little brookies are small fish that like a variety of foods, including invertebrates and aquatic insects, as well as terrestrial insects that fall into the water. Different crustaceans and frogs and mollusks, all kinds of this, even smaller fish and small mammals. And then besides a healthy plate of food, brook trout need high quality water, and they're actually very sensitive to low oxygen pollution and any changes in the pH of that water. Warm summer temperatures and lower water flow rates stress these brook trout out, especially the larger fish. Brook trout populations depend on cold, clean, well oxygenated water, high quality water. As early as the late 1800s, native brook trout in North America disappeared from many streams as the forests were being cleared and the land was being developed. So really, you can't talk about water quality without talking about forest management. And in today's world, you can't talk about forest management without talking about climate change either. So streams and creeks that were polluted or dammed or had heavy, heavy with sediments, often became too warm and cloudy for hosting these native brook trout. So this requirement for cool, clean water is proven to be a kind of a predicament as carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere continue to rise and raise the Earth's thermometer. So these little brook trout are impacted by that as well. Today, though, in many parts of its historic range, there's a lot of efforts to bring and restore these guys back to the waters that once held them. And some of the tributaries of the St. Louis River are home once again to brookies. So within the little smaller streams feeding into the St. Louis River, as well as near the mouth of where that stream enters into the St. Louis, are also good places to find brook trout. All right, moving on. Another riddle here for you. I am very unique to this part of the world. I am happy living in clean, shallow water. I only grow next year if part of me falls this year. Ducks really like me. I am good for you, and I am known as Minnesota's state grain. What am I? If you guessed wild rice, you are correct. Wild rice. This is something very, very unique to this part of the world. Wild rice, it's actually a very important substance as well. So wild rice has been a spiritual, cultural, and food staple for Native Americans for thousands of years. And the local Ojibwe here have a very unique story. There was a prophecy that led them long ago, led their people to migrate from the eastern part of the continent to the Great Lakes region, where the food grows on water. That food turned out to be wild rice, or manoman in the Ojibwe language. It's a grain that was an incredible nutritional source in the region and became critically important to their native diet for generations, and it continues to be important today. Like all of the important species that I have talked about today, much of the manoman that was once here has been lost. The waterways where it grew for thousands of years have been turned upside down by habitat loss and decreased water quality and other human activity. Like the other bioindicator species, restoring manoman is about more than just the one plant. It's restoring an entire ecosystem that people and animals and other plants rely on. Wild rice grows in clean, shallow, fresh waters in the northern half of Minnesota, as well as Wisconsin and Michigan and Canada. And it's extremely sensitive to pollution and any environmental change or damage. As an annual grain plant, it tends to be, or it needs to be reseeded so that the following season it'll produce again. And then after it's reseeded and some of it falls back in the water, then it has to go through an overwintering process to germinate the next spring. And then by the following August, by mid to late August, the rice begins to ripen. It's actually very picky about its water conditions. particularly in the summer, like the earlier summer stage. It floats on the water, kind of lays flat on the water. So it's when it floats on the water like a bobber during that floating leaf phase, Monoman is particularly vulnerable to fluctuating water levels. So heavy rain can actually uproot its very delicate root system. And unfortunately, climate change is yet another challenge to this this wild rice resource, to its future. With the struggles to survive in a changing environment of warmer, more humid nights where perhaps those leaves can't fully dry out, to more harsh and more frequent storm events and competition from other plants that might outcompete it. You know, last January was the Earth's warmest January on record, and with 2020 ending the warmest decade on record, as well as seeing how wet years have been and frequent rain events, this has been a kind of a predicament for this plant. Plant diseases and pests will flourish under warm, wet, and humid conditions. And that can also bring about fungal disease like something called brown spot. And that could actually wipe out production of wild rice. So typically in our harsh January winters, our harsh winters here, typically those harsh winters keep a lot of the invasives at bay, but the milder climate is, it's been changing that. So for Monoman to flourish, the entire ecosystem needs to be intact. Houses and motorboats could disturb Monoman. Trees and wetlands need to be as a buffer along the lake, and a great amount of work to removing the lilies and cattails and whatnot that can outcompete Monoman needs to be done as well. So there's been a lot of money and time and effort put in by a lot of people, local community members, to rectify some of these water issues that have been occurring. Though there's not much that we can do with an extreme rain when that happens to help restore and protect this treasured cultural piece of our place. But many people are taking notice and understanding the challenges Monoman faces, and through a lot of hard work, efforts are being made to restore it and to retain it. So wild rice is definitely an indicator plant. So if Monoman grows, it's a sign that the water is good. All right. Here's a couple of quotes I found interesting. I don't think we should lose hope. I still believe in restoration efforts. I still believe that rice has a place in this state, and it should forever as long as we continue to care for it. So I just thought that was a great representation of all of these bioindicator species and for all of the pieces of this web of life, right? We need to care for what we've been given. The whole aspect of harvesting it and interacting with it and having a relationship with it, it is a big part of the cultural tie. So we are interconnected to the natural systems of our place, and those other pieces of the web of life puzzle shape our culture as well, and our health, right? The health of the web impacts our health as well. And this was another piece I found. When the well is dry, we know the worth of water. So this kind of makes you think about what we have, what we've been given, and to take care of it. Not to curse the well that quenches our thirst, which I think my voice is getting hoarse. I must be thirsty. So, what well do you quench your thirst from? What river watershed is your foot in? What's your watershed address? Which one do you have the privilege of calling your place and connecting to? So the St. Louis River watershed is that large one in the red in the upper right, near by the arrowhead, part of the Great Lakes watershed. So we have to remember that the nature of watersheds is basically to move moisture from the air through and over the ground and down to the lowest point. And as it does that, it picks up pollutants and, among other things, along the way and spreads them from place to place and from plants to animals. The nature of food webs is to move both nutrients and toxins up the food web due to the eating habits of each organism. So we have to realize and notice with both eyes, with our mind and our heart, what we're doing to these other parts of the web can also impact us. Here's just another map, I guess, labeling the different watersheds. So wherever you are in the state of Minnesota, you can see the entire area that your water is shedding into. So how can you protect your watershed? There's a lot of things to do, to notice. One of the best ways to protect your watershed is basically just to get to know your watershed. So spend time within it. Spend lots of time walking, biking, or boating around your watershed. Find out what animals and plants live there and get connected to it. Pay attention to the things that you see that could, possibly be harming your watershed, and see if there's something that you could change within your behavior or make other people aware that those changes need to be made so that your water and watershed is protected. There's always something that we can do. So basically the most important part is to educate yourself and get to know it and be more connected to it. It takes all of us to protect what we love, right? So you cannot do all the good that the world needs, but the world needs all the good that you do. Just a nice thought to end the program on a good note. So we need water, and animals do too. We need that clean water, not just the dirty water in a dirty glass, but we need to look and see with both eyes, with our mind and our heart, for all of us to thrive. So we have to keep it clean. On that note, water, we love you and we thank you. So I encourage you to bundle up and get outside and walk around and notice where the angles of the landscape are shedding, where your water is moving, even if it's frozen right now in a beautiful, intricate snowflake. Notice the landscape and get to know it. So on that note, get outside and get some fresh air. Get away from the webinar fatigue. So here's cheers to your good health.
Awesome. Thank you, Carly, for that great presentation. I particularly really enjoyed that you carried the theme of interconnectedness between like a personal object or some area close to us and then driving it to something more major like the water ecosystem as a whole or the bioindicators that we went over. So before we get to questions, I'm just going to take the screen back over and quickly update you on the visitor center statuses in the Detroit district and then put some links up for you if you'd like to find out more about us or the Minnesota DNR, specifically Jay Cook State Park, and then we can get to the questions portion.
Okay.
All right, you should see there that there is the two Detroit District Visitor Centers. There's the Lake Superior Maritime Visitor Center where I'm at currently. And since the shipping season is now closed for the winter layup, we're doing cell phone tours outdoors, still on that application. The online tour of the museum, we're here during the day, regular business hours, Monday through Friday answering questions for visitors. And then there's the online gift shop link. For the Sulaks, the park is open from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m., so you can go ahead and visit that as well. And we'll reopen once things are a little safer in the world, as we know. Then just pulling up this last slide, this is a great time for you to, if you can, pull up that survey link. I'll put it in the chat in just a second here as well, and go ahead and take that survey and let us know what you thought of the program today. At the top, there's the Minnesota DNR link as well. And then the other websites where the program will be posted should be tomorrow for the recording. And then, of course, we'd love for you to join us in our next program in 2 weeks on February 4th. All right, so if we have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat and I will relay them to Carly. The first one is, what inspired you to choose natural resources as a career, Carly?
Ooh. Well, let's see. I guess growing up, I played outside a lot. I'm having flashbacks to wearing my moon boots out in the back wetland area and playing down by the lake landing and finding snapping turtle shells and catching fish, going on lots of outings and camping and fishing trips with my parents and my brother. So I guess growing up, it was instilled in me to be outside, and I just grew up with that passion of caring for what was around me. I grew up on a farm as well, so I was outside a lot and and interacting with nature quite a bit. I guess I also like to learn and research, and so majoring in geography in college. I was at a loss of what I was supposed to do with the rest of my life, but I did see a little tiny advertisement in the geography bulletin board in the hallway once, and it talked about being a national park ranger. And I didn't know exactly what that would entail, but it sounded interesting, and I loved parks, so I looked into more of that. And so I guess my passion for learning and sharing what I learn and all of that related to nature and culture. And I guess that's how it led me on this path. I've traveled a lot. I've been around to a lot of different places around the country, but um, I've been at J Cook for the longest.
Excellent. Thank you. I don't see any other questions, but I did have a question for you. And it's kind of more based on like what we can do personally to help waterways remain healthy, because you talked about bioindicators and being able to identify those, but what can we do personally to like help keep those clean?
Well, I guess you could probably start by looking around what you're doing on a daily basis. Um, I guess just thinking about things that I use on a daily basis. I just did laundry the other day, and wow, what detergent am I using? That can affect our water quality as well. So looking at the chemicals within those detergents, or making sure if your old car parked in the driveway, if it's leaking oil or some chemical, as it sits there for a while, or it's a vehicle that you're driving all the time. If you're noticing those spills happening, try and take care of it when that's possible, with time or money, or do something to prevent the spill from continuing to leak out and move. So putting something underneath the car, or picking up trash, as you're going for your walk you're going to do today. If you notice something, if you notice a wrapper or something along the street, of course, we don't always have a garbage can, or in today's world we don't want to touch a lot of that with our bare hands, but just making yourself aware of stuff like that. Herbicides and pesticides and insecticides, DEET, the chemical DEET, has been found by people who have been studying different parts, even different parts of the boundary waters. In the most remote places of the boundary waters, they've been collecting samples of water and have found DEET in the waterway. So, it's heartbreaking to hear that, but just knowing that these chemicals that we might spray to protect ourselves from being eaten by mosquitoes, those can all have an impact as it sheds and washes off of us too. So just making yourself aware of the different things that you're using, or maybe just keeping yourself aware of what you need and don't necessarily need as you're buying stuff, or choosing different products that are packaged differently. Those can all have an impact on waterways too, as you're using them, or after you don't need them anymore and toss them out. Yeah, those are just some things that have surfaced in
Yes,
my
definitely.
mind.
Yeah, and like on a general note, always recycle, right? Like we always could throw things in that recycling bin just to make a small, simple change.
Yeah.
I don't see any other extra questions coming into the chat box or anything. So I think it's safe to say we can conclude the program. But thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Carly, for joining us for this wonderful presentation. And we hope to see you again on the 4th. And stay safe, everyone. So thank you for joining us.